Okay, so we're here with Murray Rankin. We've delivered the letter and we've had some discussion already.
Yeah.
But it's gone quite well, but the signature hasn't been made, obviously. But we do want to just talk about the parts of the letter that you are happy with, the things that you know.
I want to say, first of all, I'm happy with you for coming in. One of the things in the letter is to recognize that we met, and I not only met, we've met for quite some time, and will continue to meet with you as long as you like. You guys are doing really important work in bringing attention to the crisis of climate, the climate crisis, and the need to transition to a low-carbon, renewable energy-based economy. And so, thank you for drawing attention to it. Thank you for being engaged, because I often fear people aren't as engaged as they should about the climate crisis. So thank you. You've drawn attention to the 2 degrees issue of how we have it as an urgent climate imperative to keep below that number. The scientists have told us that. The NDP has a carbon policy, a climate change policy that I'm very, very proud of. It's been endorsed by the Environmental Defence Fund as being the best among the 4 parties. I believe it's key components, because you asked me to talk about how we would get there, I think, right?
Yes, yeah, that would be wonderful.
The key components would be something that sounds sort of not terribly sexy, but I think is absolutely central, which is the polluter pay principle. That is, every activity has to be fully costed. Every externality involving the environment, such as adding carbon to the atmosphere, all has to be paid for by the companies that do the activity. That polluter pay principle, when applied to the tar sands, would be a critical change. Secondly, we are committed to getting government out of the business of providing subsidies for fossil fuel. That's a huge incentive that companies have to do the work that they're doing. We don't think that should be done. In fact, we think any subsidies ought to go to priming the pump for renewable energy and getting us into the low carbon economy. Thirdly, any project that comes forward, any application that's permission is sought by the National Energy Board or whatever, has to have a carbon lens. That is to say, you have to study what the impact would be on climate change. That has to be front and center. And so any project involving the oil sands, which we've talked about, would have to come through that filter, that lens, and we'd have to see whether, notwithstanding impact on the climate, it could proceed. So those are some of the core principles that are behind us. The most important, I suppose, last thing I'd say is that we brought forward in Parliament Jack Layton's Climate Change Accountability Bill. It got through Parliament, admittedly in a minority parliament system before the Conservatives got their majority. But it was the Senate, the unelected Senate, that killed that bill. So we brought it forward again. I spoke in Parliament on it. I'm very proud of the work that we've been doing on that issue. We take this very, very seriously. And it's only when we have a Prime Minister, like Tom Mulcair, who can go to Paris and tell the world, Canada's back. Canada's back in the carbon game. We're back, we're going to address and do our responsibility, because your letter talks about our responsibility to the planet. And we're totally, totally in favor of that. So just by way of conclusion, thank you for bringing it to my attention and being here.
I'd like to just make a clarification as well. So one of our demands is to commit to bringing forward policies in the NDP platform before the election this October that would freeze tar sands expansion. Now the freeze tar sands expansion is the part that the wording just doesn't work. We understand that. It would be irresponsible to say that we can draw a line in the sand and do that now. That
So
makes
line
total sense.
in the tar sands.
Exactly, that's it. But these things that you say, these 3 steps that you're using are essentially, you want to mitigate tar sands expansion over a longer timeline, basically.
Yeah.
But it is in your sights to do that.
Yeah,
It's just
our platform is going to put those 3 things, or I've already said, maybe 4 if you include the Climate Change Accountability Act, will be very much front and center in our platform before the election in October. These are core commitments of Tom Mulcair and the NDP. So we are hoping to form government, and we are hoping that we will be get the mandate from the Canadian people to do the kind of tough things that are required in here. Like you say, it's not a responsible thing to sign a letter that has been given to someone a few minutes before a meeting, and it's not something I ever do.
Right.
However, I respect entirely what you people have been doing across the country. I'm delighted to have met you, and I'm just so pleased that you're bringing attention to probably the issue of our time.
For one further clarification for myself, the climate change accountability, it contains those 3 points that you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes,
so,
it does.
And you are committing to bring forward that policy in October.
Absolutely. We brought it before Parliament again. We succeeded in getting the Parliament to pass it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to do it again, and this time if we have the majority, it will pass, and this time we will implement it.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Mulcair, who I'm very, I think is just an enormously effective leader, was the Minister of Environment in the province of Quebec. He resigned his job as Minister of Environment when he was asked by his leader to do a development in a park, Mount Orford Park. He said, no, I refuse this. And that's one of the reasons, quite frankly, that I am where I am today, because I supported him. I respect the integrity that decision shows. There was a bill in Quebec called an environmental bill of rights section in their Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms that guarantees people the right to a clean environment. There's a whole bunch of case law that's been produced. Tom was at the center of that. He made tough decisions when he was Minister of Environment to not allow a LNG plant at Kakuna, which is across the river from Quebec City. This is a man who gets the environment. This is a man who has a passion for protecting the next generation and our climate and generally the environment. And that's why, among other things, I chose to run for this party. He will be the leader, he will be the Prime Minister, and he will go to Paris and put Canada back on the map.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Thank you.